Well, there's a culture of drinking, lots of drinking and karaoke on weekdays. And so, yeah, people prefer to kind of start late and work later. The culture is called heshik. So the office treats the employees, and it's a way of kind of like team building. And minimum 2 times a week we'd go out to eat.
Wow.
Yeah. So it'd be like 3 courses. So you'd start at a barbecue place and you'd have your soju and beer bombs. Then you'd move on to karaoke and you'd have beer and whiskey bombs. And you'd finish the night off at like a street vendor or at a fried chicken place. And then you'd get up at 9 and be at work by 10 and do it all over again.
Architects Abroad, a podcast brought to you by Brickworks Building Products.
I'm Tim Ross and welcome to Architects Abroad, a podcast for Brickworks Building Products. Now, travelling overseas is deeply embedded in the Australian psyche, and because of our relative isolation, we're drawn to exploring the world. Now, we all know about the formative power of backpacking, but what about the vocational value of working overseas? What are the gains, both personal and professional, from time spent working abroad? In this podcast series, I talk to some of the best architects in the country to hear about their experience working overseas and how it has shaped them and their practice. In this episode, I chat to Brisbane architect Christina Cho, who is a director of COX Architecture, and she's got a pretty impressive looking resume, which includes her winning the Emerging Architects Prize in 2018. In this chat, she talks about moving to Brisbane from Korea as a kid, the return home chasing her roots, and her further studies in America and how life-changing that was for her. Christina is generous with her time and is a much loved and respected figure in the industry. She was a delight to talk to, and I know you are going to love this chat. This is Christina Cho on her time working overseas. Christina, thank you so much for having a chat. How old were you was it 1988?
Sure was.
Yeah.
Best year and a transformative year for Brisbane, Expo 88. Yeah, so we moved here when I was 4. My dad was doing his PhD on the division of North and South Korea, and at that time there was just no way he could get information through the South Korean government, so he decided to move the whole family here and do his PhD. And we moved to, a great little suburb here called West End. It was a really kind of diverse suburb. Mum got a job at the Korean Pavilion at Expo. and and every night we could see the fireworks from our apartment. Every weekend I was there. Even just the other day she mentioned the time that she lost me, and I couldn't speak English. I was only 4 years old, and apparently I was just crying, and they had to call for some backup from the Korean Pavilion, and she managed to find me.
So you got lost at Expo 88 in your first year. That's peak Australia, peak Brisbane. And how did you end up staying?
So we were only meant to stay for maybe 5 years until he'd finished his studies, but the lifestyle is so amazing, and with immigrant parents, you just want the best opportunities for your children. So we decided to stay, and it's been nearly 30 years now.
And you continue to have an incredible career. The decision after you finish university to head overseas, what drove you to do that?
So I had finished my first 3 years of architecture here at UQ, and that time was a little bit of a blur. I really had a lot of fun in my early 20s and late teens, and lots of good times I had at the Down Under Bar. But I really wanted to go out and explore the world. So the first stint that I did was in Seoul. I spent 6 months working in my city of birth before I moved to the States. And my brother had moved there the year earlier, and he was teaching English the plan for him was to kind of just learn some Korean and come back and do his master's, but he's still there 20 years on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So while I was there, I interned at a firm called Duga. It was a small practice, probably about 10 people. But the director was professor at one of the best architecture schools. So they had a lot of amazing public and civic projects, ranging from regional museums and town halls to education projects. And it was an incredible experience because I didn't have to cat up toilets like, sometimes people experience, but they let me sketch and do concepts for new projects and make models. And I knew they wouldn't use any of it or take it seriously. But the funny thing is, in the last couple of years, I had to do a panel discussion, and I talked about my time in Seoul. And while I was there, I designed this photographic studio building, and I knew it had been built, but I lost touch with everyone there. So I looked it up on Google Maps in preparation for this panel, and to my shock and horror, they'd actually pretty much built what I'd drawn. It was just
wow.
30-meter wall of like concrete balls, and back in third year, that was about representing the eye of the camera, and I had these like Le Corbusier-esque punched out windows to the side and the rear, and yeah, there it was in Google Maps.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah, and the workday there is pretty different here. We'd start our day at like 10 a.m. and finish at 7 p.m. And then we'd take these 1-hour lunches, which the company paid for. And you got this little lunch ticket, and you'd walk over to the next building where there was this massive commercial cafeteria, and all the office workers from around the area would come and eat here. And they'd serve lunch in these army trays, so you'd get some rice, some soup, and 5 side dishes, and a couple of bits of fruit. And the first time I went, I was really shocked at how quickly people were eating. And it only literally took them 15 minutes, and then we'd walk back to the office, and they'd go straight to the desk and open their drawers and take out their toothbrushes to brush their teeth.
Oh.
There's lots of chili and garlic in Korean food.
Why was it? Why the 10 till 7?
Well, there's a culture of drinking, lots of drinking and karaoke on weekdays. And so, yeah, people prefer to kind of start late and work later. The culture is called heshik. So the office treats the employees, and it's a way of kind of like team building. And minimum 2 times a week we'd go out to eat. Yeah. So it'd be like 3 courses. So you'd start at a barbecue place, and you'd have your soju and beer bombs. Then you'd move on to karaoke, and you'd have beer and whiskey bombs. And you'd finish the night off at like a street vendor or at a fried chicken place. And then you'd get up at 9 and be at work by 10 and do it all over again.
Had you spent much time back after you'd left when you went to Brisbane?
In Korea?
Yeah.
No, it was very sporadic returns. So on our summer holidays here, we'd go back for maybe 2 weeks during the winter. It'd be too cold to actually do anything. So it was really this 6 months that I spent working there that I was able to really kind of immerse myself back into the Korean culture and, use the language every day and make some, really amazing friendships while I was there.
And what was the thing that you took out of that experience? Was it more cultural than vocational?
I think it was both. I really learned so much more about my history. My father is a historian, and my mum, her family background is in the culture and arts as well. And they'd tried to teach me these things. They'd forced me to go to Korean language school every Saturday, but I never fully appreciated it until I'd experienced living and working in person and all those first-hand experiences that came with, moving there for 6 months. But, that only kind of fueled my curiosity, and then I moved straight to the States for 3 years after that.
What drove you to America at that time?
So I after finishing third year, I did a couple of months of my first semester of fourth year, and then decided to go on an exchange to California. And I was 21 at the time, and just my experience in Seoul was that it made me more curious and wanted to travel and explore the world. And at the time, UQ was offering exchange programs to UC Berkeley, but they only accepted 2 students from Australia. So I spent a month kind of, working on my portfolio and submitting it for the exchange, and very lucky that I got accepted. And it was serendipitous that my cousin, who lived and grew up in LA, who's 2 years younger than me, he was accepted to Berkeley for his undergrad at the same time in mathematics, of all things. He's a lawyer now. But yeah, so I flew into LA and we drove up together to Berkeley a week before the academic year. I found myself a lovely little studio on the main strip. And I was just so excited to be at an American college because I'd grown up watching things like, Legally Blonde and American Pie.
And was it just like that?
Oh, absolutely. The campus is dreamy. The college town is kind of set amongst these beautiful hills and really gorgeous arts and crafts pitched homes. And then all around the town there's these sporadic fraternity and sorority houses that have those big brass symbols on the gable that read like Alpha Delta Phi.
Did you join a sorority?
No, I wasn't allowed to because I wasn't local, but I met a lot of friends who were part of them, so got to hang out and go to some of those, infamous parties that represented in those movies.
Wow. And
yeah.
And what was your day-to-day life like in that period?
Oh, it was pretty intense, I think. Like all great schools of architecture, ours was in this unpretentious and unapologizing brutalist building, and it was called Worcester Hall. And people would always ask why the School of Architecture was in the ugliest building on campus, but they don't appreciate the beauty of brutalism. Yeah, the studio was massive. It was across kind of 7 floors, big hard concrete floors, and drawing desks from the 70s. And we'd spend 20 hours a day there just chatting, discussing, drawing, prototyping, and making endless cans of Red Bull and no-dose tablets in the lead up to the design reviews. And I think I managed 3 all-nighters in a row before my final autumn review, but I loved every minute of it, and it made me resilient.
In what way?
In that, I guess back then I had youth behind me, but, being able to function on less than 8 hours of sleep, to just be open-minded and accepting of everything that was presented, all the opportunities that were presented to me at Berkeley. And it's a really interesting time, I think, to be there because it's just when Facebook started up and you needed an American college email address to actually join. So there was this kind of a plethora of information and opportunities that you could have access to online. And so I just found so many different possibilities through that, and joining things like Decal and I've met a lot of kind of different people who I'm still connected with and it's still an important part of my life.
Wow! So you're there for the dawn of the Book of Face, and in terms of studying,
yeah, did
it end up playing a huge role of what you learnt there on your career?
Oh, for sure. I think one of the greatest things, the experiences I had in Berkeley was becoming a member of this committee called Decal, which stands for Democratic Education at Cal. And it was a platform to promote social change by empowering students through education. So these were all student-led, and you could submit to run courses on anything that you're interested in. And met some amazing characters, and the committee was chaired by this wonderfully clever woman who was an arts history and physics major. She was a vegan. She lived in co-op housing. But, everyone was so engaged in the state of the world and was working towards something that was kind of bigger than themselves. And I think that's the kind of notion, the values that I've brought back about, rejecting hierarchy and authority and working together for a greater purpose, and it's really greatly influenced me in my practice in every aspect of my life, and how I interact with my graduates and my students in the studio, to clients and consultants and contractors, being really generous with my time and experiences, being active and engaged in the city. So it was really a line in the sand moment for me.
Oh, wonderful. And so you're there, and it makes complete sense that you hang around for a bit longer and work, yeah?
Definitely. In the States, during graduation season, they all the big companies kind of do the college circuit and present at the expos. And I was, just graduating, and HOK Sports, which was what's now known as Populous. I submitted my resume to them, and they invited me out to their HQ in Kansas City. And so if you draw a line from north, south, east, west across the whole continent, and you draw a dot at the center line of that would be Kansas City. And I thought I'd give it a go and go and see this new city and what opportunities they could offer me. And they picked me up in a limousine, and that was the first sign that this gesture was that they were struggling to get any graduates out to Kansas City. They took me to this, beautiful sushi restaurant, introduced me to the staff, but, everyone was so delightful, but I just couldn't see myself living in the Midwest, and I just craved that diversity and that grittiness that I loved in Berkeley, and I knew that I could only find that in a big city, and San Francisco was, so dreamy. So I applied for another job. I got one at a practice called HOK, which is a global practice, and I lived in the Upper Heights, just behind the famous Painted Ladies, just around the corner from the Full House. It was a great job, well paid. It was in this, gorgeous modernist 1950s building in the financial district. We had 300 people in the office, people from every nationality. It was just a fusion of cultures and ages. The best boss ever, we called him Papa Smurf. He was this short, chunky man with wavy grey hair and this beard, and you could tell that he was nearby by the scent of his strawberry tobacco, which he'd smoke through a wooden pipe. But it was a truly multidisciplinary company with architects and landscape architects, designers, strategists, and in one corner you might have people working on the new airport in Doha. Another sector is working on a new research lab, and others were working on an aquarium. I worked in the health sector, and we're working on a $1 billion women and children's hospital in San Francisco. So it was amazing. It had a great culture and social culture as well. Every Tuesday afternoon, we'd leave the office at 4 p.m. We'd go play softball in Golden Gate Park against other firms in the Bay Area. And every Friday, no matter what, we'd all head to the bar, our favorite local place called Tunnel Top, which was this dingy dive bar up from Union Square. So it was fantastic.
You are listening to Architects Abroad, a podcast for Brickworks Building Products. If you want to see any of the projects mentioned in this podcast, head to the gallery at the Brickworks YouTube channel. What drew you home?
So I was on exchange there, so I had to come back to finish my final year. And I wanted to go back straight away. That was the intent. I just, love San Francisco. It's the most beautiful city. But when I came back, I think I still had that energy and that passion. And so in final year of architecture school, my friends Luke, Kirsty and I, we started Pecha Kucha Brisbane. So I'm not sure if you know what Pecha Kucha is, but
it's you get the slides out and you talk really quickly.
Yeah, so you get 20 slides, 20 seconds. It's automatically kind of changes over. But Mark Dytham, who founded Pecha Kucha in Tokyo, was one of the studio instructors at Berkeley. And so that's how I kind of found out about the concept. And I just thought, Brisbane really needs a platform like this to celebrate all the amazing creators that we have in our city. And so we ran that for 11 years, and we had curated over 51 events, and we had over 500 creators present their work and their stories with Brisbane.
What sort of things, I suppose, professionally have influenced you from your time overseas? What do you draw on in your practice today from those moments?
Yeah, I think all those experiences, and especially the people that I met, taught me to be progressive. And, one thing that I will always do is challenge the brief. In our studio at COX, we always encourage and engage in a democratic design process. So it's not about a single hand. Everyone's ideas and inputs from our students to our graduates is built upon being engaged and active with the city and facilitating critical dialogue about our communities. And things like the Emerging Architect Award, for me, that wasn't about recognition. It was, again, just a platform where I was able to share my experiences, celebrate the diversity of our profession, advocate for our profession and the role that architects can play beyond the building to shape our cities and communities. So it was, I think working overseas is definitely something that, I recommend to all architecture students that I meet. So one of the projects that I did with Rice Cake Mafia, which is a design collective that I made with 3 of my friends, was to design a shipping container exhibition at Tokyo Designers Week. And I think that it stemmed from the experiences that I had at Berkeley around, prefabrication and making and testing and prototyping, working with different materials. And, for us, these small contemporary and sculptural art projects was a freedom to experiment and re-energize our passions for architecture outside the traditional practice. And, those are strategies and design processes that I still I bring into my daily practice. So working with brick, working with block work, I think it's evident across many of our projects at COX, like the St. Innovation Hub, where we've used bricks, but we've worked with the bricklayers to create a really unique way and a patterning of the different textures and cuts, to the Anna Mears Velodrome or the Country Bank Stadium, where we've used conventional block materials to create something that is of interest and that is economical and robust at the same time.
This is my final question for you, is that I think most people who've been listening to this will be like me and be quite touched by the way you spoken about the places and the people that you worked with, and those experiences when you were overseas. Tell us all why Brisbane is so special to you in the same way.
Brisbane is home, and I think we are so lucky to be living in a beautiful subtropical city where our architecture can respond to that, where we can open up our homes and our spaces and our workplaces to the natural environment. And I think because the weather is good here most of the time of the year, everyone is just happier and delightful to work with.
It's a wonderful place and full of wonderful people, and it's got a great architecture scene, and it's always for me, it's always exciting to roll around in whatever's going on, and you're a big part of that. So I thank you very much for being part of the podcast. Thank you so much for your time, Christina.
Super. Thanks, Tim. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
You've been listening to Architects Abroad, which is a podcast series presented by Brickworks Building Products. If you'd like to see any of the projects mentioned in this podcast, head to the gallery at the Brickworks YouTube channel. I'm Tim Ross. Thanks so much for listening.